I've got that radiant glow, that sweet, glorious blue. And radiant
Hello there, and welcome to the Green Vault Podcast, a podcast about delving into the world of Fallout and its locations, be they spooky, strange, funny, weird, benign, or wonderful. I am your host and enjoyer of Fallout, Red. This is the inaugural episode, so welcome, and I hope you stay around for more. But without further ado, let's head out to our very first location that we're talking about today. In Fallout 3 in the Capital Wasteland, as the Lone Wanderer, you can find a location called the Museum of History, also known as Underworld. This museum houses the Capital Wasteland's largest society of ghouls, with shops and a safe place for non-feral ghouls. Now, ghouls, for those uninitiated, were once humans, but they have changed thanks to radiation. Some are from before the war and others are post-war, meaning some of them can be quite old, over 200 years in fact, and remember society before the collapse. Now, ghouls are basically people that have had their skin fall off, they don't have their noses usually anymore, they usually don't have hair either, and eventually they will become feral ghouls. And feral ghouls are basically zombies. They will attack anyone on sight that isn't a ghoul, even if they aren't feral. So non-feral ghouls can actually stand around feral ghouls and be safe, but anyone else, no. And of course, because the human race is the human race, there's a lot of hate towards ghouls, even non-feral ones. To be fair, they aren't exactly the prettiest of sights, and the idea that one could go feral at any second is scary to some people, and especially in a wasteland where survival is harsh already. So that's why they've set up their little society here, away from other people, away from prying eyes and what have you. But let's get on to the location. The museum is this rather lovely place. It's a square block building with columns coming up on all around the exterior, lovely carved faces all in this concrete, and it looks rather opulent, you might say. This quadrant outside is, however, slightly ruined by a metro entrance that goes below the entrance of the actual museum. This heads to a subway where there's lovely raiders and radroaches, both nefarious little things that'll attack you. To enter the museum, you need to go through the mall, which is a large stretch of ground. Once a park, but now a war zone filled with trenches crisscrossing and filled with super mutants. Super mutants are basically big, green, mutated people that are very angry, and most of them are not the brightest and dislike anyone that is not a super mutant. They believe in super mutant superiority, and everyone else is basically below them, so they shoot on sight. Outside the entrance also stands a lone figure. Her name is Willow. She guards the front. She claims that the super mutants don't attack ghouls, but reports state she can be attacked. When some ghoul wastelanders are spoken to in a random encounter, ghoul friends, 4 ghoul wastelanders encountered around a burning barrel, engaging any of them in conversation will result in them telling you that they were heading for Underworld, but couldn't make it because of the super mutants. They'll actually tell you how to get to Underworld and mark it on your map if you ask them about it. The ghouls will say, "We're on our way to Underworld, but we can't get past the super mutants." So there's some conflicting things there, but that is of course something you might expect to find in a big open world game. But now, heading into the museum itself, you're greeted with a foyer, a rounded table that would probably have been reception where you check in or what have you, or pay for it if it was a paid museum. And inside, the marbled and columned elegance continues. The floor is all nicely marbled with this white pattern with a few little black boxes here around and edged with some nice red edging as well, and some lovely columns. But most of it, as you'd expect, is rather destroyed. Only a few columns stand, and everything looks pretty dirty. Ahead is the Rotunda, which is what the Fallout 3 official game guide, 1st edition, calls it. Inside exist 5 doorways, all labelled at the top. 1861 to 1865, the presidency of Abraham Lincoln. 1941 to 1945, American military might of World War II. 2066 to 2077, Alaskan liberation from the Red Chinese, 2052 to present, the Resource Wars, and lastly, Underworld Journey. Underworld Journey and the presidency of Abraham Lincoln are the only ones that aren't caved in. You cannot get through. I, in fact, tried to glitch through the walls and see if there was anything there, but no, there's nothing. But aside from the doorways, there's two museum pieces. A big woolly mammoth that looks pretty worse for wear, and a good old T-Rex friend, but he's mostly broken off in half and has fallen on the ground. Again, the marbled interior continues, this time with real big thick black columns, and a predominantly black circle in the centre with some white edging, and then around the outside are nice white tiles as well. The Underworld Journey has a very imposing and impressive looking entrance, a big skull above the door, and it looks like it would have taken a lot to make. But let's head down the Abraham Lincoln Way. The door is actually labelled Museum Lower Halls. It's filled with feral ghouls and has a lot of broken displays, most of them completely indiscernible, excluding a few that are still lit up, but these tablets have very blurry text. It's actually almost impossible to read what is actually on them, which is a little understandable considering, the time this was made. Having a quick look, I can see things like the 1776 date, 1786. I see the word Hawaii, France. It's hard to read, to be honest. No doubt it is some excerpt about the Civil War and Abraham Lincoln's role in that general time. Stumbling around here as it's actually quite dark. There's quite a lot of mood lighting in this area, which is quite nice. I like the aesthetic. It's split into two levels, and the marbled floor continues, and the grand columns as well are all throughout the sort of main area, the area where visitors would go. Behind the walls and behind the facade, there's the employee area with, basic tiling and all that stuff. There's some traps laid around as well. Who laid them, who can say? And there's also turrets as well. A few terminals can be accessed in this area, but they just control the turrets. And finally, there's a few wastelander bodies you can find. Some unfortunate types that maybe decided to try some sweet looting and didn't get very far. Though there are some quest items you can collect from here, which I'll cover later in the section where I talk about the loot you can find. And mayhaps they are people that were also seeking these riches. Some potentially lovely environmental storytelling, which they do definitely love doing in the Fallout series. Through that area, you can get to the Museum of History's offices. These are pretty standard affair when it comes to decoration. Just form and function over fashion, you might say. You'll find more ghouls and some destroyed archives here, with some more turrets and terminals once again. Sadly, the non-fiction shelves are all empty now, so no grabbing a book. But most curiously of all, and I guess this area's centerpiece, as you might say, there's this rather interesting area, rather moodily lit, near the end. There is a weird sort of platform that descends from the ceiling. Not descends so much as, imagine a floor-to-ceiling column in a room, but you've chopped off the, say, bottom 2/3 of it. And on that bottom piece, you've capped on a big square or rectangular piece of floor, basically. Underneath that is a turret and 4 spotlights, which creates a nice little area that, if you were sneaking, for instance, you'd see a bunch of ghouls standing beneath these moodily lit lights in this dank, dark area of the archives. On top of that little drop-down section's also what appears to be some form of engine, mayhaps, or some mechanical parts, and a big box, as it were. What it exactly does, I don't know. Perhaps it's meant to be the power for this area. But it's a weird piece that I've not really seen around elsewhere. To the sides of this room, there are also 2 more empty versions of that. Slightly smaller and, as I said, no lighting or anything on it. Perhaps maybe there were meant to be lights on it, but due to optimization, they had to take them off. Who knows? It's hard to say. It's just weird pieces of architecture I don't remember seeing anywhere else. But now that we've explored that area, let's head back to Underworld. This is the main sort of area in this location. The door is labelled Underworld Concourse, and it is the City of Ghouls, a long marbled area dedicated to the idea of the underworld and showcasing different views on the afterlife. Once again, the marbling comes back, these black columns and black tiled floors, all edged in white. 2 stairs on either side lead up to a second level, while the floor continues forward to this glorious underworld statue This centerpiece is a black obelisk statue with people rendered in the same stone struggling to climb it. I believe it's meant to be sort of that parable of trying to climb your way out of hell, as it were. Along the handrails, the elegance continues with the posts of the guardrail looking almost like these vases made out of elegant black and white marble. The entire edging of this open second floor is just elegantly etched with this gold trim, and even the walls themselves in the entire room look marbled and textured, with interspersed white columns popping out. The denizens of this area themselves are unhappy with your presence but tolerate you. The entrance is guarded by a Mr. Gutsy, which is a military variant of the Mr. Handy. Both Mr. Gutsy and Mr. Handys are robots. Both variants are basically a metal ball with a jetpack on the bottom, 3 hinged eyeballs and 3 arms, usually with some form of attachment at the end. The Mr. Gutsy, of course, having weapons. This guard is named Cerberus, once again a lovely nod to the hellish underworld that this place is. Underworld has several points of interest: an outfitters, which is an outfit shop with a workbench, a bathroom that has some beds in it, a room with Winthrop's terminal, which has notes about the electrical system, and a unlock safe option, which, as you might expect, unlocks a safe in the room. The chop shop, which is Dr. Barrow's infirmary, surgical and research area. The Ninth Circle, which is a bar, and Carol's Place, which is sort of a hotel. The Ninth Circle has an interesting terminal. The owner, Azrakal, and yes, I did look up that name to think maybe it had some form of biblical meaning or something like that, but no, it seems to be made up for the game. He has many notes on certain people: Carol, Patchwork, Snowflake, and Dr. Barrow. He notes that Carol is a bit mopey lately and she might be a good customer for his special stock. Patchwork, who he thinks is a pretty good kid but needs to keep an eye on him as he has caught him behind the counter several times, and also notes he somehow manages to keep coming up with caps for booze, which is curious. His notes on Snowflake talk about how he's a good customer that comes back for more, and he doesn't really care about the fact that he insists he's a barber, which is, again, funny because ghouls don't have hair. And his note about Dr. Barrows talks about all the good things he must have in his office. This Azrakal, being a wheeler and dealer of booze and more, would like to very much get in there. But he also does make note that the egghead never leaves his lab, especially since he got that passed out smooth skin in there. Now, smooth skin is the term that ghouls use for normal humans. Basically, they've got smooth skin, not like theirs, where, they have no skin. This is also a lovely little note that if you find this first, might give you a hint to go and investigate this person in the infirmary, rewarding a player for looking around and reading things. In the chop shop, you'll find that there are 2 named glowing ones. Glowing ones are ghouls that are, well, glowing. Radiation pulses out from them, and if you get too close, you'll start taking radiation damage. However, these are locked behind an inaccessible door, but you can see them through 4 glass panels that's crisscrossed with metal. If you use console commands to clip through the wall, you'll discover their names are Ethel and Meat. I have a feeling that this might be cut content, because as far as I can tell, there's not actually anything you can do with them. They're just there as backdrop pieces. Now, if you have the Broken Steel DLC installed, which you would nowadays, that comes bundled, but back in the day when perhaps maybe you didn't, the chop shop can be filled with ghouls suffering from the effect of the modified FEV. This is a virus that you can put into the water if you choose so at the end of the main storyline. But that's not all. You also need to convince Griffin, a guy I'll talk about later, to sell the real Aquapura that is infected with the FEV. Only then is that room filled with more ghouls. There is also an unconscious person on one of the tables. Her name is Riley. She is the smooth skin that Azrakal referred to in his notes. Smooth skin is the term that ghouls refer to humans as we have a nice, lovely, smooth skin. I'll talk about her a little later with the quests. There's a research terminal with 3 entries: examination of the post-necrotic human, neurology of the luminous necrotic post-hum cuts off, but I assume that's human, and study of ferocious post-necrotic dystro, once again cut off, but I'm pretty sure it's dystrophy. Now, you can't actually access any of these subheadings, so I guess maybe they were cut content as well. The headings are still there, but nothing beneath can be discovered. Lastly, on the table, you can find a holotape that starts the Replicated Man side quest, which is a quest about a synth. And that's pretty much it for that area in regards of looks and what have you. Now to the notable loot. So in the area, the Abraham Lincoln area, I should say, there is Lincoln's Diary, which is a black and blue book. You can also find an Action Abe action figure. It's a small action figure with the president of Abraham Lincoln holding a sword in one hand and a second sword attached to his back. You can also find Lincoln's hat, which is a hat worn by the former US President Abraham Lincoln. And after about 200 years of neglect in the museum, it's rather sorry and worn and tattered. There is also a John Wilkes Booth Wanted poster, $100k reward for that. Civil War draft poster, which is pretty ripped and unreadable. There's also Lincoln's Voice, which is an object used to replay the voice of Abraham Lincoln. It's basically a gramophone with his voice recorded on it. There's also an antique Lincoln coin collection, which is an unmarked crate. It looks pretty standard and unimpressive. And last but not least, there's Lincoln's Repeater. Now, Lincoln's Repeater is a unique variant of the lever-action rifle. Unlike the lever-action rifle, the standard version, it uses 44 Magnum rounds, making it one of the only rifles to use this ammunition in the game. It's the strongest single-shot precision rifle in the game, and it also has a 2x critical chance multiplier and a very slow fire rate. It doesn't have a scope, but it has a 0 weapon spread, so it's a very accurate weapon. It also has a pretty good durability. It can fire a total of 400 rounds, the equivalent of 33 reloads, from full condition before breaking, because of course in Fallout 3 there's a mechanic for weapon degradation and durability. You need to use weapons of the same variant or repair kits to repair weapons as you go. There's also a few books, Nikola Tesla New, which permanently improves energy weapons skill, DC Journal of Internal Medicine, permanently improves the medicine skill, and Chinese Army, Special Ops Training Manual, it's actually next to the repeater, and it permanently increases the player's sneak skill. That was in the Abraham Lincoln area. In the Underworld, there is of course that Replicated Man holotape, but there's also something you can buy from Tulip. She sells the Railway Rifle schematic, say that 10 times fast. And from Sydney, you can also get a 10mm Ultra SMG. This can be given to you if you find a note for Sydney. It's a note from Little Moonbeam's father, which can be found at the Statesman Hotel on the 3rd upper floor. And that's it for all that sort of stuff, the old loot and what have you. Now let's move on to quests, and you may be wondering why the devil you get to collect all these Abraham Lincoln things. Well, that's because there is a quest called Lincoln's Profit Margins. Now, this is an unmarked quest. That means it doesn't show up on your Pip-Boy in your data folder when you're looking at your quests. But all these pieces you can find can be sold to people in the Capital Wasteland. Now, you can sell them to normal traders, and you'll get the standard value of the item. However, there's 3 people that will pay increased prices because of the artifact's historical value or symbolic meaning. So the 3 are Hannibal Hamlin, who is the leader of the ex-slaves at the Temple of the Union. This is probably a person that wants it for the historical value of Abraham Lincoln being a liberator. However, there's also Leroy Walker. Now, this is a leader of slavers who occupy the Lincoln Memorial. They're raiders and bad people. That location is actually in the mall as well, so if you wanted to quickly sell them, going to him is probably the best way to do it. And there is also Abraham Washington, a very presidential sounding person. He is a historian and curator at the Rivet City's Capital Preservation Society. Rivet City is a city that you can eventually go to through, I think you have to go there through the main storyline when you're following your father's footsteps and it leads there. It's a really cool place that I'll definitely talk about at some point in the future. It's a aircraft carrier that's, I think, cracked in, it's about half, I believe. People occupy and live in one half of it. It's a nice little location, I will say. So selling at least one artifact to Leroy Walker will grant you the access to that area without being shot, because they are raiders and normally shoot on sight. Only the Lincoln Memorial poster can be sold to Leroy, then pickpocketed back. Everything else is destroyed apparently once you sell it to him, which is mayhaps on purpose or mayhaps just they missed that one item, or who knows. The barter text for Abraham Washington is also incorrectly stated, at least for two of the items, the Abraham Lincoln's voice and the John Wilkes Booth wanted poster. Basically what happens is you say, hey, I don't want 60 caps for this Lincoln's voice, I want 80, and he's like, you've got a deal, here's 120 caps. Guess he just really likes the cut of our jib or something, I don't know. It's just basically some incorrect text in the end. Other quests include you gotta shoot 'em in the head. Now this is an actual side quest, and you get it from a person called Mr. Crowley, a ghoul, and he tasks you with taking out multiple people, including Alistair Tenpenny, who is at Tenpenny Tower and a place I'll probably talk about at some point. Alistair Tenpenny is the person you work for if you want to do some deliciously evil fun stuff instead of being a, good old good boy. Riley Rangers is another side quest, and Riley is the human that you find in the chop shop. She is unconscious and you can actually wake her up. You've either got to convince Dr. Burrows to wake her up or do it yourself with a high enough medicine check. Riley explains that she was wounded by super mutants while trying to exfiltrate and get help for her team, who are stranded on the roof of the Statesman Hotel. This is one of several ways to start this quest. The next quest you can find here is rather conditional. It is the Wasteland Survival Guide. This is only if you have destroyed Megaton. Once again, Alistair Tenpenny stuff, evil and all that good stuff. And this only happens if you haven't completed that quest with Moira Brown, who is in Megaton, who comes here after becoming a ghoul after you blow it up. Once again, other quests that I'll probably talk about in some other episode. Next up is Hired Help. This is an unmarked quest as well. Once again, it doesn't go into your data folder in your quest log. Now, if you speak to Azrakal in the Ninth Circle, he will tell you that he holds the employment contract of a ghoul named Sharon. Sharon is actually a person that become a companion for you, which is someone who follows you around, helps you battle, and, most importantly, I think, becomes a great place to store things when you're over encumbered and can't move. Now, Sharon is bound to work for whomever holds his contract. Azrakal tells you that he dislikes having to compete with other beverage outlets in Underworld, most importantly, Carol's Place. He proposes that if something were to happen to Greta, who works there, he would be willing to give you the contract for Sharon. And here you get two options, basically follow through with the plan, or you can actually just straight up purchase Sharon's contract through dialogue. And so either outcome, you get Sharon as a companion to travel around with you. Another unmarked and minor quest, it's repeatable as well. If you speak to Winthrop, you can unlock the option to bring 5 pieces of scrap metal, and in exchange he'll give you a Stimpack, Radaway or Rad-X. Stimpack is a healing item, Radaway is an item that heals radiation, and Rad-X is an item that passively decreases radiation you take while it's in effect. So a great thing to know if you're a little loot goblin like me, and find yourself filled with scrap metal and other things. Now, last but not least is the amazing Aquacura. This is a side quest that came with the DLC because the DLC enabled you to play the game after you finish the main storyline. Before then, you didn't have an option, the game just ended. Now, Griffin is a ghoul outside Underworld, and he is selling the amazing Aquacura, a tonic that he claims will cure the ghoul condition. However, you learn the truth behind the rebranding rather quickly. There are 4 ways to begin this quest. The first option is to talk to Griffin in the Museum of History and ask for a bottle of Aquacura. According to your Pip-Boy though, the water is irradiated. If you bring this fact up to Griffin, he will deny it, claiming your Pipsqueak 2000 or whatever it's called is broken, and the quest will be added. You can then investigate what he's doing to the water. The other options to start the quest is passing a speech check with Scribe Bigsley or hacking his terminal, and the fourth one is to kind of just stumble upon the bottling operation itself, where you'll find a holotape that adds the quest. The first one you start here in Underworld, the rest of course are elsewhere. So this is where the modified FEV can come in. So if you did the evil route and put the modified FEV in Project Purity being the main storyline's conclusion, you either supply the wasteland with fresh clean water, or you secretly put the FEV into it and it harms anyone that has mutagens in them, or mutations I should say. So this guy Griffin, he actually isn't selling Aqua Pura. What he is doing is selling normal tainted dirty water in the Aqua Pura bottles. He's pouring out the real Aqua Pura into tubs and then selling that on to other people. However, you can convince him to sell the real Aqua Pura once you discover his nefarious ways. However, if that Aqua Pura also is tainted with the FAV, which is rather bad for ghouls as you can imagine. And that is when the chop shop ends up being filled with other ghouls, because they're all under the effects of the modified FAV. If that all makes sense, hopefully I stated it eloquently and succinctly enough. The final thing we'll go over for this location are the Easter eggs. These are just fun little tidbits and what have you. The first being that this is Fawkes' location to wait if you don't make him a companion after freeing him when you take out Raven Rock. That is, you tell him to go away and that you don't want him to be your companion when you do that quest. It's pretty understandable and a relatively logical place for him to wait. The ghouls won't be bothered by him because he is an intelligent super mutant, unlike all those guys standing in the mall. And the guys in the mall probably won't shoot him because, well, he looks like them, a superior super mutant friend. Next up is one in Carol's place. There is a painting there by the 18th century Dutch-French romantic painter Henri Scheffer, depicting a scene from Dante's Inferno of Dante and Virgil. Hopefully I got the pronunciations relatively correct in that one. There is also a painting on the second floor in Underworld, and it is also a real-world painting called Dante and Virgil in Hell by William Adolphe Bouguereau. I'll make no bones about the fact that I looked that up and probably still mispronounced it. And the last reference is that the Knight's Circle, the bar, is a reference to Dante's The Divine Comedy. But yes, that is it for that location, the Museum of History. A nice little fun place for ghouls to hang out and be all ghouly and be themselves, I suppose. Far away from a lot of other people that might shoot first and ask questions never. But yes, I hope you've enjoyed that location. Now we're going to move on to our second location, Vault 111. In Fallout 4, you, the sole survivor, are a victim of Vault 111 and its experiments. Built by Vault Tech, found just above the sleepy and idyllic Sanctuary Hills, the home of you and your family before the war. It's very interesting because this is the first time, as far as I'm aware of, that we the players got a look at the world before the war, not seen through the weird veil of 200 years later with old weird tapes and remnants of things that we can barely understand. We get to look at this pre-war atomic Americana that Fallout is well known for. The entrance to Vault 111 is nestled on a hill overlooking its selected citizens it was intended to save should the worst happen. Fenced off by the military, the fresh vault was guarded by imposing power armor wearing soldiers, one wielding a bulky minigun. Now you witness this as you flee towards the vault. The war is starting to happen, the bombs are starting to fall, and you and your family pack up and run. Passing through the burnt orange trees of autumn, you head up the hill, being let through. Many citizens around you are begging to be let in, but if you're not on the list, you're not getting through. Up top you'll find several crates, some Vault Tech equipment, and some vehicles. It actually has this feeling of being halfway built almost, like they were still working on it, but ran out of time. The entrance here very much differs to any other vault you've discovered. Most of them are just behind a door you'll find, and then you'll find the actual circular gear vault door that the series is well known for. As you stand atop this platform, the worst happens. A brilliant orange flash in the distance and a mushroom cloud ejects upwards towards the sky. A panicked Vault Tech personnel yells to send you down, and you do so, descending down on this gear-shaped platform. Above you can see this wave of energy wash across as the top closes, and you are safe for now. Inside you get a great look at pre-war vaults as well. Vault 111 sign with Welcome Home above you, crisp and clear, still on the ceiling, and you walk over the grated walkway into the vault. Citizens around you are panicked and dealing with the overwhelming sense of emotion that would come from witnessing such an event and knowing that something terrible has happened to the world. And mayhaps survivor's guilt that you are safe, or just, the relief you would feel knowing that you survived. It's all freshly painted, clean walls, clean walkways, fresh pipes all leading everywhere. It looks very industrial but cool sci-fi retrofuturism. An aesthetic that is a personal favourite of mine, as you can probably imagine being a person making a podcast about Fallout. Passing through the well-lit corridors, you see other people being put into tubes and others dealing with the ramifications of everything. You get handed your Vault 111 suit and you put it on. You are told by a scientist from Vault-Tec that the pods you are about to step into will basically decontaminate and depressurize you and take you deeper into the vault. You're fine, just relax. But for those, of course, who have played the game, this is a mandatory part, and you know that's not what happens. Of course, some main story stuff happens. You witness your baby being taken and your partner being shot. Then you are frozen once again to awaken quite a few years later, you eventually discover. And that is when you step out into the post-war world. Now, 210 years since you were frozen. You are awakened by what appears to be an error. You can open your partner's pod and take their wedding ring, and it joins the one in your inventory. There's a terminal that tells you that the cryogenic array and life support had a premature termination resulting in failure. Isolated manual and remote overrides detected, controls disabled. This makes you unable to open other pods. Looking around, you'll see that all the other occupants in the pods in this room are no longer alive either. These terminals also list the names of the occupants. The once shiny veneer of this fresh vault has been wasted away. The ground is wet with water, the pipes are rusted. The place now has an aged feeling with water dripping in the distance. A rather ominous backdrop to your current plight. You can now gain entry to another room filled with other cryopods, a room you witnessed through a window when you were first entering the place. You can go and discover that all of these people are also no longer alive. The same error appears on the terminal in that room as well. Turning back, you head out and try and find a way out. An emergency exit door which you walk through on your way in is broken and it requires you to take a long way through the vault. Rad roaches are first spotted crawling on the other side of a window as you pass. Rad roaches are essentially cockroaches that have gotten real big and real angry. A common occurrence in the Fallout universe, radiation doing some fun, more retro sci-fi things rather than just being incredibly horrible, and ensuring a shorter lifespan. The decay continues out here, rusted walls, water-stained vents, and general muck on the ground. Up ahead you can find a terminal with several bits of useful information. Well, more lore information rather than useful information to you in your current predicament of being alone in an empty vault. First and foremost, you discover the purpose of the vault. It was designed to test the long-term effects of suspended animation on unaware human subjects. So Vault-Tec wanted unaware people to get into their pods and see what happened. To be honest, in the world of Fallout, this is pretty standard affair for Vault-Tec. Next, you find out what security's job was. These are people that were hired by Vault-Tec to run security for the vault during the experiment and however long it lasted afterwards. Their job was to maintain installation integrity and monitor the science staff activity. They have to check for intrusions, leaking atmosphere, settle disputes, and enforce regulations of the Overseer and Vault-Tec. The Overseer is the person that oversees the entire vault and has final say and is supposed to be the leader. We'll get to them a little later. Next is a warning that states that under no circumstances are staff allowed to deviate from assigned duties. Insubordinations or interference with vault operations are capital offences. Security staff are authorised to use lethal force. Other responsibilities are laid out as well, such as instructions on receiving the vault residents, security keeping watch, research staff escorting residents to pods, and what have you. Basically, the instructions they need to follow when receiving unaware residences into their cryopods and into the experiments. Another chilling sentence, pun sort of intended, states that residents not accounted for in the manifest should be asked to step aside and be detained forcefully by security if necessary. Once all residents have been sealed into their reservation chambers, dispose of the detainees. The research staff are of course in charge of maintaining the life of the cryopods. A paragraph notes life-saving intervention is only permitted if greater than 80% of the resident population has perished while in cryogenic suspension. So if people are in a bad way but they've got enough other people to replace them, just let them go. Great. Awesome. Thanks, Vault-Tec. As horrible and harrowing as that is, don't worry, independent research is encouraged and left to the discretion of the overseer. So that's nice, isn't it? Another note states that Vault-Tec personnel are also expected to perform other duties, such as janitorial and food prep. The overseer has the say in who does this. Some more text assures the staff that Vault-Tec will monitor hazards such as attacks, radiation levels and such. Once they deem it safe, the all clear will be sent out to the vaults. It also notes the evacuation is at the overseer's discretion, which is important, It also notes the evacuation is at the overseer's discretion, which is important to note, and to disregard any notices from organisations or individuals not associated with Vault-Tec, including government and military. Residents are not to be disrupted or evacuated. Vault-Tec will attend to their needs remotely once Vault 111 staff has been evacuated. And yes, it does say has been, not have been. I think that's a little bit of a spelling error there that I found, though I think that technically and potentially is correct, it just reads rather clumsily. So I win morally. The terms of the assignment for staff is also laid out. They have to wait 180 days after they've been locked down unless the all clear is given before then. After 180 days, the overseer has final say, all clear or not. Now that was quite a lot of information to take in, and quite a few bits of it are rather harrowing. So let's do a little summarization. People were let into the vault unaware that they were going to be tested on. Vault-Tec has full control of their lives and the lives of their staff, with full control and complete discretion to decide who lives and who doesn't. Putting themselves above any government or military force, Vault-Tec's law is final. Residents are not to be saved unless there is a small percentage of the population left. Freely experimenting on these residents is also encouraged, and that the overseer has full power over everyone. Also, staff are forced to do things like cleaning or preparing food. You could easily see this being contorted into a way to punish people who did not toe the line. Just one great big fantastic pile of manipulation. That basically summarizes Vault-Tec. Now, fortuitously, we have some journal entries. These are security logs from one of the non-scientific staff spanning from the 23rd of October 2077 to the 23rd of April 2078, with a final entry having no date. The first entry questions the ethics of the research, referring to the people as icebergs, and some feelings of remorse over the ruse, stating, "It just didn't seem right that we were smiling at them all that time before putting them on ice." The next refers to a rather dull Christmas party, noting none of the scientists or overseer showed up for the party. The writer suspects more higher-up secrets. I found it interesting that they state just a few months until the all clear is supposed to come through. To me, that implies they were told at 180 days the all clear would come through, not maybe. Perhaps it's the writing though, but that was my impression. Next is only a few weeks before the all clear is expected. They lament at the time spent staring at the same walls and also report rumours that some say the all clear will never happen. They also know they only have enough food left for another few months at the most. They have the proverbial bad feeling about the situation. The last dated entry from 23rd of April 2078, exactly 6 months after the war, they state the main door accessing the vault is malfunctioning. This is the same door you tried to activate at the start. They state the only way out is through the overseas evacuation tunnel. How convenient for him. He has a science team watching the door into his office at all times from a little makeshift checkpoint. He also notes a meeting scheduled for support staff and security only later that night. The last entry has no date, but states the all clear isn't coming and food is low. They confronted the overseer, who yelled at them and locked himself and the science team in his office, then demanding they hand over any food, weapons and medicine they have by tonight, or there's going to be consequences. The final line states, "I've talked to everyone, it's time. One way or another, we're getting out of this vault." And that's it for that terminal. Now, moving ahead, you get to a depressingly small kitchen and an eatery that has one terminal as well. The kitchen, of course, is rather depressing and small. Everything in this vault is. You were lied about the fact that there was something deeper beneath. This is all that there is. One long picnic bench, which is actually 3 benches connected together, the terminal of course, and a small kitchen in the corner. Ahead is also a lonesome lavatory and sleeping quarters, which are all mostly filled with bunk beds, now rotted. The rubber mats that count as the flooring on the ground are all dusty and gross too. The terminal in the kitchen is a recreational terminal. A memo from the overseer states this terminal is a privilege that will be revoked if performance declines. Once again, another form of manipulation the overseer can have. We also have the top scores, which are all 3-letter names, which are actually an Easter egg of sorts and refer to some of the console commands. TGM, for instance, is God mode. Opening Fallout 4's console and typing TGM will have you not take any damage, not spend any bullets when shooting, and no resources are used when building, and also subverts the perk locks on building certain items in build mode. Fantastically, you can also play a mini-game called Red Menace. This is a Vault-Tec computer game from 2075. It is basically the first Donkey Kong game, but instead of Kong's barrels rolled and thrown at Mario to save a fair maiden, a cloaked figure throws and rolls warheads at Vault Boy, the series mascot, as he tries to rescue Vault Girl. The typical fun twisting of real-life things into game wartime propaganda that Fallout loves doing. You can eject the holotape the game is on and take it and play it as you go or on other terminals. This area actually has quite a few little tutorials for the player. One, that terminals can have holotapes that you can eject. There is melee combat against a radroach, your very first one, and in the next room in the form of power generators which are dangerously throwing lightning around themselves, frying a radroach before your eyes. The radroach serving as an example of what happens if you step in it. Though when I think about it, I feel like nothing immediately comes to memory when thinking about using this exact environmental hazard again. There's always environmental hazards in the way of radiation, but this lightning being thrown around is pretty rare, come to think of it. So in a way, it's kind of giving the player the wrong impression that this sort of stuff might be common when it's not really. On the other side of what I shall dub the lightning room, you actually discover your very first skeleton in a Vault 111 uniform. It's lying on the ground before the door, you can't really miss it. Something you may now think about when I mention it, but mayhaps didn't think at the time, but the skeletons often stay together. When you walk over them or move them with your activate button, the bones all stay connected, but they shouldn't. I understand it's very much an optimization thing. Having all those bones ping around everywhere would be a nightmare for physics, and the physics in Fallout 4 isn't the greatest. And by that I mean it causes a lot of crashes. Walking ahead through more dirt-stained corridors, you are eventually led to a desk. This, from context clues, is the security checkpoint of the Overseer that we heard about in the previous notes. On the table there are some stimpaks, the lovely health, and a 10mm weapon and rounds. On the ground you'll find another skeleton, this one in a scientist's uniform. They've fallen backwards off a chair in front of the desk. It seems like they were perhaps using the terminal that is on the desk in front of them, and then they were blown back, potentially shot. The 10mm is not in their hand or anything, or on the ground next to their head that might imply certain things, so it seems like they were most likely, at a guess, shot. Something they do in the Elder Scrolls series and the Fallout series, which I really love, is environmental storytelling. Because not only are they blown back, but on the walls it looks like there are bullet holes. Now I will say these are very large, almost the size of a small plate in size. So it's hard to tell if it's meant to be bullet holes or just the decay of the wall, but they look black and scorched, so I'm inclined to believe bullet holes. And if you'll remember, the last entry on those security logs was them basically saying, it ends here one way or another. I think it's heavily implied that this is the result of that. The terminal on the rounded wooded table in the room is the Overseer's personal terminal. It has the Overseer's personal instructions from Vault-Tec. They cover the basics of the test, but also state, under no circumstances is suspension to be disrupted. This includes the administration of life-saving measures. Your staff is also considered expendable. Insubordination or attempt to evacuate prematurely are capital offences. Unused cryogenic pods are the preferred method for cadaver disposal. But on a lighter note, on the side of fun and whimsy, you have the entry about the cryolator, locked behind the master lock in the same room. The cryolator was developed by the Overseer, utilising the vault's large stock of chemicals and components. He created the prototype as a way to pass time while he waits. You can eventually return to lockpick this lock when you've got a high enough skill. It requires master, and it's basically a unique freeze gun. Back in the early days before it was patched out, you were actually able to retrieve Dogmeat, your dog companion, and get him to retrieve the gun through the case. It was a little glitch that you could do. Like a good little boy, you'd ask him to find something for you and he'd pinch it right through the case and return to you with a cryolator in his mouth. It was quite fun and adorable. Another terminal entry states that people from Concord, a nearby town, were enrolled too, but I can't imagine any of them made it in time. We barely made it and we were in the town just below the vault. The Overseer also seemed fascinated with the prospect of leaping forward in time and wishing he could join us to see the future. This journal entry is, however, from before the Grey War started. I imagine his opinions may have changed a little bit since then. He notes only one staff member was missing when they sealed the vault. He was worried people would be suspicious, but the overwhelming nature of the situation means all the residents went into the pods without a fuss. An issue later occurs with the Pod C3. The subject, as he puts it, had heart palpitations. An error occurred nearly thawing her out. Checking back, I did notice, however, that Pod C3 is denoted as Mr. Callahan. No doubt a small error. Mrs. Callahan was in Pod C2, so it was probably intended to be her. Just a small mistake in some wording, I suspect. He suspects the technical hiccup was Vault-Tech's remote override systems that may have sent an errant signal. He questions if these pods will even remain functional after the evacuation is complete, because at that point, no one would be inside the actual vault, it would only be remotely run by Vault-Tech. He then goes on to talk about the supply shortage, lack of the all-clear and grumbling staff. He knows the radioactivity will be insanely high, even after 180 days. He knows they're not leaving. He assumes the all-clear would be to receive further instructions from the main office of Vault-Tech, not actually being rescued and allowed to return to the surface. He also laments not knowing what to do if the all-clear doesn't come. The final entry is the other side of the security staff's final log. The Overseer knows, however, if they open the door, everyone inside is doomed to a radioactive end. Consolidating the remaining supplies, he sets on a course of rationing, finally stating, if people don't like it, well, that's fewer mouths to feed. Sadly, this is the last piece of information you can gather from Vault 111. There is no stated conclusion to the situation. The environmental storytelling the Fallout games love to do isn't really quite enough to go on either. The scientist at this terminal that was splayed backwards seems to be telling the story of someone being shot and falling backwards. There are some bullet holes behind this scientist, of course, but there are also a few that seem to be right behind the shelving that actually has another 10 mil and some more ammo. This is right next to the cryolator, and this appears to be some form of rudimentary weapons locker. You can use the Overseer's terminal to open the evacuation tunnel. Moving on, you come across a few more rad roaches and then you're finally exited to the entrance of the vault. Here you'll find a few more rad roaches and 2 more skeletons in scientist uniforms. You can take the Pip-Boy 3000 Mark IV from the skeleton's arm at the control panel for the vault door. I believe that this body is most likely the Overseer, as they are the only person to have a Pip-Boy, which is the only thing that can open the door. So therefore, logically, this must be the Overseer. But that begs the question, why were they here? I have 2 theories on this. The first is that the Overseer eventually decided to open the vault, but doing so let in an immediate flood of radiation. The Pip-Boy has a Geiger counter and would have gone mad, letting the Overseer know there was too much radiation outside, as he suspected. His last potential act was to reseal the vault, perhaps in a panicked attempt to save himself and the others before succumbing, right along with any other survivors. Time or possibly in Vault-Tech could have eventually scrubbed that radiation away, which is why you aren't irradiated when you leave. That's one hypothesis, but it doesn't really answer the question as to why there's only about 3 skeletons around the vault itself. If my hypothesis is true, there should be quite a lot. So my second and more prevailing theory is thus. The revolt attempted by the other staff was successful. Barreling through the checkpoint, they shot any in their way, eventually actually shooting the overseer and dragging them to the console, or perhaps they held them at gunpoint and took them to the console and demanded they open the door. The overseer left with no choice or no ability to protest. The door was opened and they ran out into the wasteland, hoping to survive, but the radiation would have very quickly gotten to them. However, with this theory, I also foresee a couple holes in that scenario. For one, there were stim packs and a 10mm in ammo on that table with the Overseer's terminal, as well as another 10mm in ammo in the cage where the cryolator was, which was unlocked. You would think in an attack they would have taken those as they would have been vital resources, so that doesn't quite make sense. The second is that when you leave the vault, the second being, and this one is a little bit more loose, that there aren't any Vault 11 bodies around the top of the entrance, except for the ones that would have been there at the time of the explosion. That being civilians in outfits and a couple Vault Tech security people. However, they could have made it some distance before they perished. But if it were me telling this story and doing this environmental storytelling, I would have had multiple Vault 111 suited bodies lying all around the top of the entrance. Of course, you can poke holes in that theory, stating that maybe they were in too much of a rush to pick up the weapons, and that yes, of course, they made it some distance before they perished, and their bodies are long gone. Both theories have holes in them, and I don't know if we're ever really going to find an answer to it. As you leave the vault, by the way, the Vault Tech computer tells you to enjoy your return to the surface and thank you for choosing Vault Tech. I guess no one told the voiceover computer lady that they weren't actually ever going to leave, and no one was going to have a fun time on the surface. As you leave the vault, you're greeted by a blasted hellscape, your surroundings devoid of life, empty but for some skeletons, and the trees are bare and empty of leaves. The place you once called your home, Sanctuary Hills, below you, is nothing but a ruin. Now you, the sole survivor, are out to find whoever took your baby, if you can be bothered to get around to it. There's a lot of other things to do first, I will say. But yes, I was actually curious to see how well they mirrored the post-war and pre-war scene around the vault. Having a look, all the equipment seems to be the same. The crates, the crane, it's all pretty much there. The only difference, and the thing they didn't quite get right, was in the box where the guy hits the button to send the vault lift down. In pre-war, there is nothing but a first aid box on the wall and the little stand with the button. Post-war, there are some rubber mats on the ground with papers everywhere. There's a crate on the side there with a box in it that would have a little bit of loot. There's a table, there's a rusted table with a box of paperwork under it as well. Everything else is mirrored very well, but for some reason that thing they must have just missed, I guess. It's not really important, just something I thought I'd check out. There aren't really any quests that lead you back to the vault. The only quests are War Never Changes, which is the main story start, the pre-war section that you play. Out of Time, which is the main story leaving the vault, so those two are kind of you have to do regardless. The last one is Dangerous Minds, which is technically not even in this vault. You are reliving a character called Kellogg's memories of him coming into that vault. That's actually the guy that shot your partner and took your baby. Once again, that's main storyline stuff, so no fun side quests or unmarked quests actually lead you back there. The only thing to return for is the cryolator once you have master level lockpicking skills. A fun little side note, in the Dangerous Minds quest, the quest where you walk through Kellogg's memories, you discover that Kellogg had been directed to not reactivate the life support for the other residents and not to release them, essentially leaving them to their doom. A little note here, I am about to spoil the main stuff of Fallout 4's main storyline, so if you don't want that spoiled, skip ahead about 30 seconds. 60 years later, due to an error in Vault 111, you are released from your cryostasis pod and escape. That's what you believe, however. It turns out that it was in fact the personal choice made by Sean, now director of the Institute, and not an error of the Vault as initially thought. Sean, if you don't know, is your baby. Well, former baby, I suppose. We're all technically former babies, I guess. Some of us more than others. So yes, unlike the first place I covered, the museum, there's a lot less quests and notable loot in this one. The cryolator and the copy of the Red Menace video game are basically the only notable loot. And here near the end, I thought I might have my final thoughts on both locations. So the Museum of History, I think it's a really cool place to go seeing how the ghouls live, because at that point you might not have ever heard of ghouls aside from the fact that they're ugly, gross weirdos that might attack you. You actually get to see that they have a form of society, that they're, well, basically people too. The architecture there is absolutely lovely, and inside is even cooler, especially the Underworld area. The awesome statue, that one in the center, the black obelisk one, is really cool. I can definitely tell someone had a lot of fun designing that area. It's, from memory, pretty unique as well. The architecture outside is similar to other areas, but inside I think that's pretty unique to just that area. Only a few other places mayhaps use like the tiling texture on the ground and what have you. The quests there are fun, and taking down like Alistair Tenpenny for Mr. Crowley if you don't like the evil type is pretty good. And it also gives you the morale boost of getting Sharon out of that crappy situation. All in all, not too bad of an area, I'd say. As for Vault 111, it's really fun to see Fallout before the war. I really love the retro-futurism aesthetic, perhaps not the ideology sometimes of, oppression of certain people, but the general aesthetic and Americana. It's a very idealized version of it, I will say. But of course, with the addition of having fancier robots and cool CRT monitors that somehow still manage to program the sophisticated AI, it's all very sci-fi fun. It actually really makes me wish for a pre-war game. I would absolutely love like a detective open world type game or something. I could really imagine going around a almost Boston-sized area that's mayhaps smaller but a lot more open when it comes to going into buildings and what have you, and in doing some like fun detective noir story. I would hate it if it was linked to the Vault-Tec and the war and what have you. I think it would just be cool to be in that time and have it actually be slightly separate. But, that's just me wishfully thinking. I don't think we'll ever have something like that. I think the synth companion you can have, Nick Valentine, that you also come across in the main storyline, being hugely inspired by like trench coat wearing, smoking, noir types of the time, really has influenced my want for that as well. But yes, Vault 111. It's a relatively tight and well done introduction to the world and mechanics as well. You get to melee, shoot, you learn about terminals mostly. You don't learn the hacking minigame yet, and I don't think there's anything to lockpick from memory either, other than that master lock, which it would be impossible for you to do that, because you wouldn't have the levels appropriate. So yeah, there's all that. But there you have it. 2 fun locations, and hopefully more to come in later episodes. If you do like this podcast, please really do let me know. Leaving a like and leaving a comment or what have you, subscribing as well, all 3 of those things really let YouTube know that this is good and can be served to other people and should be. I think it should be, mayhaps, don't you? But yes, the more interaction I get, the more this feels like it's worth doing as well. So yes, everyone supporting is valuable indeed. I'm also very happy to receive polite and constructive criticism. Tell me things you did or didn't like about what I've done in this podcast. Mayhaps things you might want to suggest, of course. I've done it in a format that I think is fun. I'd also love to hear your suggestions about locations I should check out. But not just a, hey, check this out. Tell me why. Why you think that location over all the others would be a fun one to talk about. Doesn't have to be too much, just an interesting story on some terminals or something like that. But yes, to pull me into that location, I'd like to know why you think it's worthy of being talked about. I'd also be curious to know if people listening to this podcast are familiar with the Fallout world and do or don't need things explained like ghouls. Or perhaps even if you are familiar with it, you don't mind me talking about it still. And yes, the way I talk about locations and their formatting might change in the future too. I did run Vault 111 a little bit differently than what I normally would. The Museum of History is a bit more the standard procedure I have. I just thought it'd be fun to do Vault 111 a little bit differently because that's how you experience it in the game. You experience Vault 111 quite differently to most other locations, so I thought I'd run it a bit differently. If you're curious to hear more from me, I do have other channels. My flagship channel is Sanguine Red Games. Links will be in this description and on the channel page, of course. There I do Fallout gaming stuff, mostly Fallout 4 modded content, where I do some high quality edited Let's Plays through some mod packs, and also the occasional review as well. I also stream there once a week if you want to catch me live. I also have another channel, Sanguine Red Talks. That's more review-based content of older games, and nothing's been up there for a little while, but I am working on a new one and plan on revitalizing that channel too, so check that out as well. But yes, here we are now at the end of the podcast. Thank you very much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this, and I'm hoping many more episodes will come in the future. But I have been Red, your lovely enjoyer of Fallout, and that is all from me for now. So I'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.